Channel open. Welcome back to WeeklyTrek, a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions podcast network. I am your host, Alex Perry.
What's today's date? The date.
Today's show was recorded on January 11th, 2020, and is current through the Star Trek Short Trek episode Children of Mars, so beware of spoilers. All right, let's get into the show.
Good day, Voyager, and welcome to A Briefing with Neelix. It's a catchy title, isn't it?
WeeklyTrek is a 30-minute news show bringing you the biggest stories in the Star Trek franchise. We are in a new golden age of Star Trek. There are 5 television shows at some point in production, possibly more on the way, and enough merchandise to fill the Bajoran wormhole. So stick with me and I'll help you sort the real facts from a lot of the Dominion propaganda that you'll find online. But I can't do this alone. And my guest this week is the host of the Legacy Trek podcast, Mike Bovia. Mike, welcome to WeeklyTrek.
Hey, Alex, thanks for having me on today.
No, thank you so much for being here. Well, Mike, I ask my guests this question every week. I want to know something that's got you feeling good about Star Trek at the moment. What's got you moving at Warp 10?
Is there anything else going on right now besides waiting for Star Trek Picard? I mean, we're 2 weeks away. The LA premiere is this week. As you always say in the open, we're in that golden age. And I mean, right now, it's at Warp 10. We've got that coming up. Season 3 of Discovery on the horizon. First season of Lower Decks. I mean, I don't think there's anything else that can really get you going. And if that doesn't get you going, I don't know what will.
I know, I'll admit, I thought I would be cute this week and sort of pick like Operation Annihilate, just, you know, the most random episode, the oldest one I could think of. But no, I mean, yes, and my pick is the same. As of the day of recording, we are 12 days away from the premiere of Star Trek Picard. We are 2 days away from the premiere event for Star Trek Picard, when members of the media will get their first look at the show. Very excitingly, it sounds like they will actually get to see the first 3 episodes at the premiere on Monday. So I think a lot of the reactions coming out of that should tell us a decent amount about the contours of the show itself. It won't just be the first episode. They'll get to see 3 out of 10 of the episodes of the season. So we'll have a pretty good idea of what's coming. But I mean, yeah, it's all systems go. I've just ordered myself another 2 bottles of Chateau Picard to add to the 3 that I've already got, because Star Trek Wines is running a 20% off sale in advance of the premiere. And I have some people coming over, so I feel like I need a few extra libations for them. Do you have any plans for premiere night itself, Mike?
I don't as of yet, and I think a lot of that is just lining up schedules with people. You know, my daughter and I, she's my co-host on the podcast, and we'll definitely be watching that night. It's just a matter of whether or not we'll have other friends with us doing the same thing. My wife also, I mean, she's watched every iteration of Star Trek. She's a completist, believe it or not, and she's not even that big of a fan. I guess part of that has to do with being married to me, but and her daughter also being on a podcast. But yeah, we'll all be sitting down and watching it. We're all pretty much looking forward to it. We just all sat down and watched Children of Mars last night, so that we're all on the same page getting ready. I am, however, the only one in the family that's read the 2 Countdown comics so far. I got to get them caught up on that.
So you are currently taking the title of Admiral Trekkie for the Bovia household at the moment.
Yeah, I have to do that.
What did you think of Children of Mars?
You know what? I had to watch it a couple of times. The first time I liked it. Don't get me wrong. It's totally different than any other one that we've had so far for a short trek.
Mm-hmm.
So watching it a second time and even a third time, you get so much more of an appreciation for it, especially the storyline of, you know, the 2 girls basically almost bullying each other and then joining together in the face of tragedy. So I don't know. It's getting me excited even more for the premiere in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think the thing I took away from the short trek was just this idea that, you know, if we thought we knew what the show was, we really don't know what the show is, right? Like,
absolutely.
I won't spoil, you know, what the sort of twist of the short trek is, because I know our international friends have not had this chance to see it. But the only thing I'll say about that, though, is this was not essential viewing for Star Trek Picard. It's definitely like, I think, and I put this in the review I wrote for TrekCore, it was more or less the most expensive trailer you probably will ever see for the show.
Yeah.
It just kind of teased very minor hints about what will happen. And I think a lot of that information information we will get in the early kind of moments of the show. And, we'll get a lot more information than we did in this one, since we only just got, kind of little snippets of what was going on. But it still was very well done, very well put together. And if we were going to get a final trailer before the premiere in 12 days. I mean, that was a great way to start.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, without further ado, then let's turn to the week's top stories.
There's a war going on, and I'm a reporter.
So our first story this week is an interview in Vanity Fair that was done by the one and only Sir Patrick Stewart. It was a big profile of Sir Patrick. He has the cover of Vanity Fair this week. Just this fabulous photo shoot that if you haven't had the opportunity to see it yet, you really must log on to either the Vanity Fair or head on over to the Trek Core Twitter feed and take a look at some of these amazing pictures of Sir Patrick wearing these fabulously colorful suits. It defies explanation in an auditory medium. But he did this profile with Vanity Fair, and it was very interesting. There was lots of stuff that we had heard before. I mean, he talked a lot about, his childhood, his upbringing, kind of things that, if you are a Patrick Stewart fan, you have heard a lot about, and also talked about, how he was talked into coming back to do Star Trek. Again, a story that he's recounted a number of times before, and we've talked about on this show. So we won't dwell on many of those details, but there were some new kind of pieces of teasing information that came through in the interview that it would be fun to highlight. The first, I think, is just this idea that he felt really awkward on the first day of shooting. He described it as like wearing the wrong underwear.
Yeah.
Like getting back into playing this character again, which, I mean, I can't imagine going back and doing something I hadn't done for 17 years and doing it again. I'm sure that would feel like a really odd experience. But it sounds like he's, taken to it. A couple of other things. He talked about De Niro, the dog, who's playing number one, is not in the show all that much. Patrick says that he hopes we shall see him again. He does say there are no Cardassians in season 1, but from the trailer for Star Trek Discovery Season 3, there was a quick shot of a Cardassian. So if you're looking for a Cardassian fix, Discovery might be the place for you. I think the interview was probably done in early December because it was right before he did the 2 reprisals of his one-man Christmas Carol, which he did in New York, I think December 13th, 14th of this year. And the interview mentions that the week after, Michael Chabon and Akiva Goldsman were planning to come to Patrick's house to kind of talk him through their plans for Star Trek Picard Season 2. So tying back to last week's episode, I think even more confirmation that production is moving ahead on a second season of Picard. But I think the most interesting thing about this interview, and this is the part that, Mike, I'd love to get your kind of perspective on, is he talks a little bit about the political sort of slant that Star Trek Picard has, and also the ways in which it will be different from Star Trek The Next Generation. So I think straight up front, it's very important to say that Patrick says as part of this interview, we are remaining very faithful to Gene Roddenberry's notion of what the future might be. But then he does go on to say that he sort of wanted this show to be a response to Brexit and to Trump, and that the idea of having a next generation redo in the current political environment just didn't quite sit right with him. So he says, as part of the interview, I think what we're trying to say is important. The world of the next generation doesn't exist anymore. It's different. Nothing is really safe. Nothing is really secure. And then goes on to say the new show was me responding to the world of Brexit and Trump and feeling, why hasn't the Federation changed? Why hasn't Starfleet changed? Maybe they're not as reliable and trustworthy as we all thought. So it certainly does seem like there is a real sort of push here to say something tangible about modern politics. But Mike, I mean, I know a lot of people have kind of maybe responded not so well to these comments, thinking that means that the sort of hopeful, optimistic future that Star Trek is known for is maybe not a part of the show. But what's your reaction to the interview?
I thought it was interesting what you were saying there about how he wanted to let everyone know, look, we are staying faithful to Gene's vision to an extent, but we can't do a redo of The Next Generation. People have always talked about how that was just life and perfection, so to speak. And so life changes. And it wouldn't be fair to say that Starfleet and the Federation wouldn't have changed from the Next Generation time period. I mean, you go into Deep Space Nine and they're in full-fledged war. So there has to be some kind of change that's happened. And then as well, you think Star Trek was always at its best, especially in the 60s, but also going forward, when it took the stories of the time and adapted it through its own storytelling. And it sounds like that's exactly where he wanted to go with this. And, you know, maybe not do a soapbox version of his political feelings, but get the same type of stories out there, just from a different point of view. And he talks about how the state of the world, specifically in his interview, Britain and the United States, and he says he's not sure which one of the countries is in the most trouble. So, I mean, looking at that, I think it's going to be interesting, the storyline that's told here. And people have been up in arms about Discovery and how they want to say it's a different generation's version of Star Trek. But you don't have to be a political person to just enjoy a good story. And I mean, that's really where I've always taken my point of view from Star Trek. You know, it's neat to see the tie-ins with modern day life, but at the same time, as long as it's a good story, I don't think any of that other stuff needs to matter to you, as long as you enjoy what they're putting forth on the screen.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I've been reflecting on this. You know, when we think about Star Trek as presenting this optimistic, hopeful future, and we sort of pass that back through the previous shows, the reality is it's not about everybody in every episode of every series, 100% of the time, always behaving with 100% moral clarity, certitude, and with principles. That is true for our series heroes, but that has never been true for everybody in the Federation, everybody in Starfleet. I mean, the running joke about the Badmirals that goes all the way back to the original series, or I guess the bad commissioners and ambassadors that they would have in the original series, you know, is really true, right? Mm-hmm. Not everybody in Starfleet behaves for the right reasons all of the time. I mean, Deep Space Nine had a whole 2 episodes about how members of Starfleet led a coup against the Federation president. What's important, I think, is that Picard and the people that he surrounds himself with are the ones behaving and pushing for and fighting for that optimistic, hopeful future.
Yeah.
If we're in this world where that I think a lot of fans kind of think that Star Trek should be, where, you know, all the problems are worked out, all the problems are fixed, that's not very interesting.
Right.
There's not a lot of like interesting storytelling there. The interesting storytelling is that this sort of hopeful utopia that we would like to see in the future is something that you have to kind of fight for, and you have to fight to maintain once you get it. That complacency, it doesn't just happen. It happens because people work really hard and they keep working really hard at it. So from that perspective, I think it's really exciting.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, you know, life is about people having conflicts amongst each other. You can be friends with someone and still have issues with them at times. And so to have that perfect utopia in a way where Gene had said nobody ever has conflict with each other, I mean, yeah, maybe that might happen someday, but the storytelling that you're looking at really has to give people a basis in real life as well, I think. And so it looks like there is conflict, obviously, between Picard and the Federation.
Right.
And we're going to see how that all gets resolved out.
And it has something to do with this big twist from Children of Mars, which was something that I was not at all anticipating.
Yeah.
And we'll have to see how it plays into this, you know, sort of Romulan Borg kind of storyline that they've been teasing out.
Yeah.
That's all the news we've got on Star Trek Picard this week, but the premiere is in 2 days, and I'm sure there will be a ton of news coming out of that. So next week's episode, I'm sure we'll have lots of new information about the show and about the franchise as a whole. But let's switch now from talking about Star Trek Picard to talking about Star Trek 4. Yes, a week after I had said I don't plan to talk about Star Trek 4 or the next Star Trek movie anymore, because I was getting tired of there not being a substantive update on what was going on, we actually got a little bit of a substantive update on what's going on, specifically from Noah Hawley, the creator of the Legion TV show, executive producer of the Fargo TV show. The Television Critics Association winter meeting is going on right now. And so Noah Hawley was appearing at that to talk about Fargo season 4. But he was then asked after that about the reporting that had been done in the trade press. Nothing has been confirmed from the studio that Noah is associated with potentially the next Star Trek movie, and that he's been tapped by the studios to write and direct. And so in comments to Deadline, he talked a little bit about, it sort of confirmed that, yes, Paramount had been speaking with him about a Star Trek movie, and it did sound like there was maybe a contract in line for him to do something, because he does seem to have put thought into what his vision behind it is. And actually, it's really interesting because it's sort of not in the direction that we were anticipating. I think what we were thinking was that a Noah Hawley Star Trek movie would be a fourth Star Trek movie in the Kelvin timeline, that it would continue the threads of 2009, Into Darkness Beyond, and it would include the Kelvin timeline cast. That seems to be not the case. So Noah, in comments to Deadline, he's quoted as saying, "I have my own take on Star Trek. And going back to what I loved about the series Next Generation, when a lot of franchises focus on might makes right, Star Trek is about exploration and humanity at its best, and diversity and creative problem solving. There's nothing better than the moment when William Shatner puts on his reading glasses and lowers Khan's shields. It doesn't cost anything, but it's that triumphant feeling about smarting your enemy. For me, it's about getting to those elements of the show. I don't necessarily find action in and of itself interesting unless it's story." So it's early days. I'm still talking with Paramount, and I have a take, and I got to write a script. So that was his comments to Deadline. He was then asked a similar question by The Hollywood Reporter, and they asked him, well, do you think that means that you will have a new cast rather than the Simon Pegg, Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto cast? To which he responded, yeah, I think so. And went on to say, to call it Star Trek 4 is kind of a misnomer. I have my own take on the franchise as a lifelong fan. It's early days, I don't know, but new characters often involve a new cast. And in addition, if that wasn't quite enough, so, you might be thinking, okay, well, then if it's not the Kelvin timeline, maybe this is the thing we've been talking about over the last few months, which is with this merger, you could have movies that are set in the TV show, the Prime timeline. But no, maybe this is a separate thing altogether. He was then asked about, well, is this necessarily going to connect up with the work that Alex Kurtzman's doing, aka Discovery, Picard, Lower Decks, etc., etc. And Noah said, I know, Alex. There isn't a mandate from Paramount to connect it. And on some levels, there's a bit of a wall, the TV version and the film version, which implies that there is still some separation and the merger has not sort of brought together the TV and movie divisions of Star Trek yet. I have my own story and want to make sure, as I did with Fargo and Legion, that I'm respectful to the underlying material, that I'm not unintentionally changing things that people love or feel passionate about. So it's important to do that research as I go. Wow, Mike, that is a lot. What are your first reactions to Noah Hawley's comments on, I guess we shouldn't call it Star Trek 4, the next Star Trek movie?
You know what? I got to say, I really did enjoy the Kelvin timeline movies. But that being said, if he starts taking things in a different direction, I don't think I would have a problem with that. Beyond ended on a good note, I think it would be a good closeout of that portion of the franchise, if that's what it means. But it's always kind of exciting to think of Star Trek taking a turn in a new direction with a new cast and getting to know some new people. And maybe that's just the Star Trek apologist in me who likes anything that, well, maybe not likes and loves, but is willing to give a chance to anything that they're putting out there that has the Star Trek title on it. I'm willing to give it all a chance, and I'll probably even buy it, even if it's not my favorite thing out there. But still, taking it in a new direction, maybe seeing some new cast brought up, I find it exciting. If they decide to go in the direction of the characters that we already know from the Kelvin timeline, I'd be excited about that too. So I think either way, if there's some positive progress happening here, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think I'm 100% with you on that. I think I would be really interested to see an entirely new, fresh take on some element of Star Trek. I certainly think that the kind of comments that Noah was making are the kind of things that you would want to hear someone say about what a Star Trek movie should be, right? I mean, his example about it not being might makes right, that, you know, smarts winning out the day is the thing about Star Trek that he really liked.
Right.
Is very encouraging to my mind, because I also love the Kelvin timeline movies. Well, 2 out of 3 of them. I mean, Star Trek Beyond is probably in my top 3 Star Trek movies of all of them.
Yeah, me too.
But JJ certainly never felt like he could give you a really clear explanation of what was special or unique about Star Trek. And to hear that straight out of the gate from Noah Hawley is really exciting and very encouraging. It felt like JJ, it had to be brought by the other people around him.
Right.
Like Bob Orkey, like Alex Kurtzman. But in this case, if Noah Hawley's right out of the gate with that sort of philosophy, that's very exciting. And to the point you were making, if that's with the Kelvin timeline crew, that's great. If it's something else entirely new, that's actually really exciting. You know, it would be cool to see an entirely new take on some of these characters in this franchise. I mean, we've broken the seal now on the possibility of having alternate interpretations of the same, you know, set of characters and stories. And ultimately, my feelings on the movies have always been that the movie is successful if it makes more Star Trek fans, not if it fits all together into the canon and continuity in a really neat, tight way that, you know, we can all feel good about. If it makes more Star Trek fans, it is a successful project. So yeah, what a fun and exciting place to be in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing you think about too, when you look at his comments, you know, some of Star Trek's best movies have been the ones that kind of step back from making action and adventure the whole plot line and make it an episode type movie.
Right.
You know, does it have great special effects in it because it's a movie? Yeah. Does it have explosions and stuff because it's a movie? Yeah. But the storyline is something that we would expect if we were to flip the TV on and watch a show, which is what we're used to as fans. And I think based on his comments, it seems like that is the direction that he is thinking when putting pen to paper as far as a script goes.
Yeah, so, I mean, we'll see where things go from here. Obviously, you know, he says the script's not written yet. It doesn't even sound like the contract maybe is fully signed and executed, but it sounds like he's starting to think about it. He has an idea, right? He describes it as he has his take, and we'll have to see where that goes from here. So very early days, but after last week's kind of miserable, you know, I think I was pretty ornery on the last episode about this, of, you know, what's going on with these movies, you know, Quentin Tarantino continuing to dabble or not dabble, whatever on earth is going on with that project. Does sound like the Noah Hawley project is alive. It's in the early days, and maybe by the end of this year, we'll know a bit more about it.
Yeah, looking forward to hearing more on it. As long as it's positive and not, oh, it's a dying thing already. You know, I'm looking forward to hearing some good news coming from it.
100%. We are ripe for some good Star Trek movie news for sure. Okay, so shifting from movies back to television, Star Trek Discovery has been nominated for a GLAAD Award. This is its second nomination for Outstanding Drama Series for Season 2 of Star Trek Discovery. It was previously nominated in 2018 for Season 1 of the show. The GLAAD Awards recognize the various avenues of media for their fair, accurate, and inclusive representations of the LGBTQ community and the issues that affect their lives. There is stiff competition for Star Trek Discovery amongst the nominees for Outstanding Drama Series. The other nominees are Batwoman, Billions, Euphoria, Killing Eve, the most recent L Word series, The Politician, Pose, Shadowhunters, and Supergirl. But very exciting to see Star Trek Discovery be recognized for its LGBTQ inclusiveness and storyline. And I, you know, would assume the big focus there is the Stamets and Culber storyline. Mike, were you satisfied with the storyline for those two characters over the course of Discovery's 2 seasons?
You know, I got to say, I was interested to see how they were going to carry it out in Season 2, having seen all of the comments following Culber's death in Season 1. And I think it was a very interesting way that they were able to pull it back. And at the same time, not make it exactly what you thought it might be. Okay, he's back and everything's going to be as normal. It was different, I think, than most people were expecting to come out of it. And I mean, that was right up until the finale, until you saw the change in Culber's eyes. And so I think that this is probably going to be something that we see with each season of Discovery, that it gets nominated for this award based off of their story and how it goes forward. Like they said, it was only the first chapter in the beginning. So we're going to see development of that as time goes on.
There are lots of interesting possibilities ahead, and congratulations to Star Trek Discovery for its nomination. And so our last story this week is a new release in the Star Trek Adventures role-playing game line of books. The Gamma Quadrant sourcebook is now available for purchase from Modifius Entertainment. Joins a long list of books that they have put together and published a core rule book, a bunch of books that have sort of missions that you can go on as part of the role-playing game, a bunch of division source books for command, sciences, and operations, and then they've done alpha and beta quadrant books. So this is the third of the 4-part series. The book has lots of information on the Dominion, Gamma Quadrant, Dominion War, and you might be thinking, oh, I don't play role-playing games, therefore, what interest do I have in an additional source book? I also do not play role-playing games, but I do own all of these books, and I do that for 2 reasons. One, the artwork in them is phenomenal, and the artwork in this one also looks phenomenal. The cover is a shot of a Dominion battleship and the Defiant sort of facing down against each other. It's just a really gorgeous piece of art, and the art throughout the books is really, really good. But there's also just a ton of really good kind of information about the in-universe stuff of the galaxy, right? There's lots of information about different races, and in the absence of having a ton of new reference material for the Star Trek franchise, these books are actually just really nice reference books for large pieces of sort of 24th century Star Trek. So even if you are not a Star Trek Adventures player, there's still something to enjoy out of these books. You can purchase the book directly from Modifius Entertainment, retails currently for about $30. I think it hits Amazon.com in May. Mike, do you own any of these Adventures books?
I don't, but now hearing your descriptions of them, I'm probably going to have to go and spend some of those Federation credits on it, because you're right. We haven't had a whole lot of reference material recently, and if it's reference work that includes good artwork, then I'm all for it. So I'll have to check these out.
Yeah, they have and I'd encourage you just to go on the Modifius website and click around the source books, because within them, they've got like preview pages and it shows you some of the images of the art that's inside, and it's all original art. They have some great illustrators who kind of put together, action shots, or, on the cover of one of them, there's a like a Cation in a Deep Space Nine uniform. I mean, like the kind of stuff that we would want to see as fans. So it is really cool. And as I say, as a result, not just appealing to role-playing game fans as well.
Cool.
All right. Well, we've talked about the facts, and now let's speculate on what's going to happen in the future of Star Trek.
You make some very good points, Captain. But it's still all speculation and theory.
So each week, I and my guest will give you a wish or a theory about Picard, Discovery, anything going on in the franchise right now. So Mike, let's hear your theory or wish for this week.
Well, I've been seeing a lot online, and of course, none of it has been confirmed by CBS yet, but the threads going out there that Discovery's already been picked up for a season 4.
Yes.
If we're following the plot line that we've had so far with Discovery and now Picard as well, it's that even before the next season premieres, they're getting picked up for the following one. So I'd like to think that is a theory that is going to be confirmed at any moment, that season 4 has already been greenlit and ready to go. We've mentioned the Picard already being at season 2, but then I had also looked ahead, and Lower Decks is already confirmed for 2 seasons already.
Yes.
So I mean, how can we have anything more on our wish list?
Yeah, I've seen these stories going around too, have not been able to independently confirm them, but the big kind of source that people have been using to make this argument that Discovery has been renewed for a 4th season is there's an entry in Production Weekly that indicates that season 4 of Discovery is listed as under development.
Right.
That has been the source that folks have used to say that there was a season 3 pickup prior to the official announcement of a season 3 pickup and a season 2 pickup prior to the announcement of a season 2 pickup. So the entries in that, it's a trade publication. The entry there is interesting. It has a high batting average for being correct. So I think the smart money is probably on a 4th season for Discovery being a lock. We know that the 2 animated shows were picked up for 2 seasons as part of the initial order. That is because when you're doing animation, because it takes so long to do the actual animation, you pull the writers' room together and have them write 2 seasons back to back, and then it goes into animation. But yeah, I mean, the stories that have been circulating the internet say Discovery for season 4, Short Treks for season 3, that we don't have any additional information on whether that's true or not, other than quote unquote, inside sources. So yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, I think the expectation is that CBS will announce the pickup for Star Trek Picard and hopefully for Star Trek Discovery shortly after both of those seasons premiere, because that's been their kind of track record thus far. But it inspires a lot of confidence about the future of Star Trek now into 2022, that there seems to be so much on the way and so much activity. I mean, Star Trek Picard season 2 at this point is a done deal in all except name, right? They're openly talking about it. They just haven't formally announced that it's taking place. And I would imagine CBS has made a huge investment in Star Trek, and it seems to be getting them the kind of results that they want in terms of subscribers for CBS All Access. So very, very encouraging about the future.
And to think it was just a scant few years ago that we had nothing on TV.
I know. Can you believe it? When we're so spoiled now.
Yep.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I much rather today than 2015 before Discovery was announced.
Right.
So my theory this week relates to Children of Mars. So if you want to go into Star Trek Picard totally unspoiled, without any information about what the show's going to be, call it a day on this episode at this point. But if you have watched Children of Mars, plow ahead. As I said at the start, Children of Mars was an extended trailer for Star Trek Picard. It didn't have a massive amount of information about the show other than there being this big attack on Mars, on the Utopia Planitia shipyards, and on the surface of Mars itself by what the short describes in a kind of news shot as rogue synths, which is all it says and all we know about it. We don't know anything more than that, but it does seem like some of those shots from the trailer of those black starships that are destroying a space station and attacking a red planet are attacking Mars. My theory is that the synths are Soong-type androids. So we've seen in the trailer, there's this shot of this kind of closet full of people, bald, with the kind of yellow, kind of Data-esque skin, the yellow sort of Data-esque eyes, and these numbers printed on their foreheads. And I think one of the things that Starfleet has done that has caused Picard to become estranged from Starfleet is they have done what he warned about in The Measure of a Man, which is they took the technology of Data and they used it to create a race of synthetic people to advance whatever kind of objectives they thought they had at the time, and that has backfired on them. And that the kind of Data kind of thread of this show is going to have to do with Picard grappling with the fact that the technology that gave life to his dead friend has now led to these atrocities and all of these bad consequences. How that fits in with the Romulans, how that fits in with the Borg, I don't know. But just based on what we have available, that's my theory for the synths and how that plays into Picard. What do you think about that, Mike?
I think that's a pretty awesome theory for how things are going to play out. And it does make an awful lot of sense, because I know when the trailers were first coming out, everyone was trying to figure out, what are these android type things that we're looking at? What basis does it have in the show? And I think putting all of that together, that does lead into a logical way of having Data in the flashbacks in the show, because Brent Spiner himself said, yes, it's Data, but it's not Data the way you think of Data.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes it logical as to why he would return for something within this season.
And in about 12 days' time, or in about 10 days' time, when you hear this episode, we will actually have some concrete information and we'll know whether this is true or not. Whether this will turn out to be as awful as my theory about the Constitution class Enterprise not being in Discovery Season 2 and it being some far in the future Enterprise, I will see. I think that still ranks as my most audacious and most terribly wrong theory on Weekly Trek, but we'll see in the weeks ahead how that plays out. Do you have a theory or a wish for Discovery Picard or the future of the franchise that you'd like to share? Tweet them to me at WeeklyTrek, and I might feature your theory in a future episode. Well, that's all the time we've got for this episode of Weekly Trek. Thank you so much to my guest, Mike Bovia, for joining me today. Mike, how can people contact you if they want to continue the conversation?
Well, you can check me out on our show's Twitter feed, and that is at Trek Legacy on Twitter.
And you can find this show on Twitter at Weekly Trek and me at Alexander T. Perry. And if you enjoy the show, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast player of choice. And please check out some of the other great shows on the Tricorder Transmissions. And if you like our shows, please also consider becoming a Patreon of Tricorder, which you can find at patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions. And lastly, if you're looking for Star Trek news on the internet, I hope you will turn to trekcore.com. Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you to all of my listeners. And until next week, live long and prosper.